Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Glassford in the Department of History at the University of Prince Edward Island.
Why is it difficult to find the voices of women in history?
It's difficult because their voices haven't been left very well in the documentary record, and that's for two reasons, I would say. The first is institutional, in that women didn't have access to the corridors of power for most of recorded history in most places, so they don't pop up so much in terms of government documents, the sort of traditional archives that we've created over the years. And secondly, I think it's more of a social reason in that women have been schooled for most of history to not recognize themselves as being of historical interest, and the things that they did, which were of course primarily domestic, not being considered to be of, quote, historical interest.
So does that mean they leave different kinds of artifacts than men do?
It does. A lot of them couldn't read or write, so they don't leave as many written records, and so instead we have to look to more artifacts, I guess, and so home appliances can tell us a lot about women's lives, or clothing can tell us a lot about women's lives in some periods. And also we just need to be more creative with the sources that we do have, read between the lines and look for women where they pop up. For instance, in court records, sometimes women will take sexual assault cases to court, and we can learn things not only from what they say about those alleged incidents, but also from the way that they talk about them, and learn things about their education levels maybe.
We don't see them in the quoted in the newspaper and things like that, or Hansard or something like that. But I mean, would they keep her of diaries? I mean, are these useful tools?
They are, yes. Again, certain classes of women would be more educated and more likely to write about their daily lives or write about their experiences. But even sometimes when women do keep diaries, they often have traditionally been seen as not containing the kind of information that would be useful to a historian. So again, you have to read what's there with more of a critical eye, or just be open to the kinds of things that they wanted to talk about.
Is it difficult to sort of try to figure out what someone's life was like based on just looking at a tool? Because I would think that that's the sort of artifacts that we have.
Yeah, it can be. Again, you have to have a very open mind, and you have to ask different questions, because a tool doesn't say, this is what I was, thinking when I was using you. So, for instance, something like the mangle that women would use to wring the water out of clothes when they did the weekly washing. If you get a hold of one of those, you can try it out and maybe see exactly how much strength was required to do that kind of washing on a daily basis.
You teach a course that sort of illustrates to students what it's like trying to piece together the stories of women. Can you tell me about that?
I do. So in History 386, which is also Women's Studies 386, we looked at 20th century Canadian women's lives. And in the Her Story assignment that I had them do, they had to pick a female relative or neighbor who was born before 1970 and do some research. They weren't allowed to do oral history interviews, because that is kind of the easy route. But they had to try and dig up some artifacts or information about a relative and write a short bio of some aspect of their life, so maybe their home life or their marriage or their career or something. And then also produce a short reflection about what it was like to try and recreate that person's life.
And what did they discover?
It's harder than it looks, I guess is the short version. Largely, well, a lot of them went in with a lot of enthusiasm and were excited about thinking this was going to be a walk in the park, and then didn't find the kinds of records that they expected were there, or the records that did exist, or the artifacts that did exist, didn't speak as clearly as maybe they expected. So they had to work a little harder and ask different questions.
And this is relatively modern history. This is not the same thing as trying to find the story of someone from 200 years ago.
Very true.
Did they make that connection?
I think the best students did, because of course, yeah, it's difficult enough to reconstruct a woman's life when she's not, the first female prime minister or something. Difficult enough when they're born in 1950, and if you go back 100 or 1,000 years, it's even more difficult. So sometimes you only have one or two pieces of evidence to try and reconstruct an entire life or experience.
Dr. Glassford, thanks very much.
You're welcome.